groups to the museum in the Golan and to see that. I'm just going to say one or two words about Yom HaZikaron before Miriam formally welcomes Dan. And this is a moment. It's a very serious day in Israel. It's not at all like what we might experience for Memorial Day in America. Believe me, in Israel, no one is out looking for a mattress or a car today. It's a very serious moment in which Israel today remembers 23,928 soldiers and victims of terror. If you happen to have watched a little earlier today on I-24, depending on your TV stations, you might have seen the ceremony. When you are in Israel for Yom HaZikaron, it begins in the evening, exactly 8 o'clock Israel time. A siren sounds, and then there's a complete minute of silence. So let's just wrap our heads around the idea that an entire country stops exactly at that moment to remember the people that give it its freedom. Because freedom, as we know, does require sacrifice. Natan Alterman was a famous Israeli poet. And in 1947, he wrote a poem called Magash HaKesef. Magash HaKesef means the silver platter. In it, he imagines two soldiers, a man and a woman, who appear from the mist and head walking towards one another. Silently the two approach, the poem says, and stand. Are they of the quick or of the dead? Through wondering tears the people stare. Who are you, you silent two? And they reply, we are the silver platter upon which the Jewish state was served to you. This is what Israel celebrates this day in these 24 hours. And this year, families have been once again allowed to go to the cemeteries, to say prayers, to visit with their loved ones, as they were not allowed to do last year. And then in this dizzying transformation, as soon as Yom HaZikaron ends, Israel enters right into Yom Ha'atzmaut, with its singing and its dancing and its joy. It is an incredible experience to have all of that together, beginning in a 24-hour period. I've been in Israel a few times for this, and I can tell you there's nothing more moving than to be in Israel for Yom HaZikaron and for Yom Ha'atzmaut. President Rivlin spoke today about the importance for the young generation and for, he repeated several times, for unity in the country. So without listening to me anymore, I'm going to we'll invite Miriam to take us into the program for tonight.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you so much, Dan, and Dan's lovely wife, Tali, and your family for being here tonight. Dan, we're really honored that you're here with us tonight. And I just wanted to, before I introduce Dan, just give you a little bit of an outline so you know what we're doing tonight. So I'll introduce Dan. Dan will talk to us. And when Dan is done, we have a beautiful memorial ceremony where 32 of our friends will be lighting a memorial candle and saying the name of one of Dan's fallen friends from Tel Saki. And when we are done with that, Dan will take questions and answers. So throughout the evening, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box, or you will also have a chance at the end. We'll unmute you. You can unmute yourself at the right time, and you'll be able to ask questions that way. And then we will conclude. The cantor and rabbi will say the El Maleh, and cantor will also sing Hatikva for us to leave us on an uplifting note. So I just wanted to share that I remember as a young girl growing up in Vienna, I went to a Jewish day school, and I had an Israeli teacher who used to tell us about these incredible heroes during the Yom Kippur War, who were these young soldiers, and they were on a hill, and so many Syrians surrounded them, and they were so few and had almost no ammunition. And somehow they were so genius that they warded off all these Syrians by making a lot of noise and positioning themselves a certain way. I never forgot this story, but what I didn't know is that one day I would end up living in the same town as one of the heroes from the Tel Saki story. So Dan and his family live in Hillsborough, where I live. Today, I believe they're in Florida because they share their time between Hillsborough and Florida. But Dan is a dear friend, an incredibly inspiring person, and you will hear from him himself, but I'll tell you a quick background. During the 1973 Yom Kippur War, Dan served in the IDF as a paratrooper and took part in the difficult containment battle against the Syrian offensive in the southern Golan Heights. At the time, and for the first 3 days of the war, there were less than 100 paratroopers and a handful of tanks against an onslaught of 11,000 Syrian soldiers and 900 Syrian tanks. Dan was a member of the third and final rescue force, consisting of just 6 warriors, led by Major General Yoram Yair, who liberated Tel Saki and his besieged friends and brought back for burial his fallen brothers. At the end of the battle, Dan made a promise to his fallen friends to tell the story of their ultimate sacrifice. Dan moved to the United States and had a successful business career in investment banking. And now Dan is fulfilling the promise he made all these years ago to the memory of his 32 fallen friends and the values of friendship and love and dedication that made the impossible possible. In 2003, Dan founded the Friendship and Heritage Foundation, Friends Never Forget Friends. And in 2013, Dan and his wife Tali built a visitor center at Tel Saki, where thousands of visitors come to visit throughout the year, and the largest Israeli flag proudly flies. So I'm wearing a pin that Dan gave me, but I have a bag of these beautiful pins with Dan's friends, and we will have them available for all of you if you'd like to have one of the pins with the heroes that we will be commemorating tonight. So without further ado, Dan.
Okay. Thank you, Miriam. So first, I would like to thank Miriam and the Morristown Jewish Center, Beit Israel, Rabbi David Nessen, and Cantor Shana Onigman. Thank you to all my friends and family for being here today. I must also mention that this is the first time that I'm doing it ever, because I'm always in Israel with my friends that remained after the Tel Saki. So for me, it's the first time, and because I'm very excited, and I have also cliff notes to make sure that I don't forget and don't skip. And really this, I typically refrain from talking about myself, because for me, the story is about these 32 friends that did not come back from Tel Saki. And I'm veering from my history, and I'm going to actually talk a little bit about myself. With that said, I always like to use audiovisual. I prepared the presentation, and I'm going to use it as a guide to show you some of the pictures that you're going to see today, never been seen by anyone before. What has transpired after the series Valley of Tears, which in the US was watched by approximately 6 million viewers, in Israel about 4.5 million viewers, that it opened an enormous amount of historical connections to what has transpired during the Yom Kippur War. And subsequently, I received some, in the past month or so, I happened to receive, as the chairman of the foundation of the Tel Saki warriors, I received a few dozen pictures. We were not aware that actually someone was filming us and taking pictures while we were fighting the war. It happened. So you're going to see tonight some of those pictures for the first time. Because I'm not sure who the audience is in terms of age appropriate, I cleaned it up in a way that it would not offend, even if there's a younger audience, it should not offend the younger audience. So with that, I'm going to share. Can you allow me to share my slides, please? You know how? Okay. Google Drive. Connect. Google. To the extent possible, I'll answer at the end any question you might have. Looking for my slide. Zip on. Okay. So on the left, you see the picture of my 32 fallen friends. And this is my story. I'm really dedicating this to my grandsons, Almagor, Levi, Noah, and Yossi, for them to know the heritage. So this is me on October 1st, 1973. As a paratrooper, I was part of a special warfare platoon, and a little bit over 2 years into the service, on our third year, because we served in a special unit, actually we had to sign up for an additional year, 4 years instead of 3. October 1st. October 1st is the day that we all arrive at the Golan Heights Paratrooper Command Bunker. It's in the southern part of the Golan. Because of the high holidays, I'm trying to think. Do you want to show, before I talk about my story, do you want to show a quick 5-minute video, Miriam, maybe?
Yes, I will. I can show the video now. Should we show it now?
Yeah, let's show it now because that will give a background perspective of the background, please.
Perfect. I'll play it now.
On that Saturday morning, the paratroopers of Company A, 50th Airborne Battalion, were busy with routine activities in the Golan Heights. A small contingent from Company A mounted an armored personnel carrier and took off towards a reconnaissance post on Tel Saki. To the north, a few IDF soldiers gathered around a handful of tanks parked in standby positions. None of them were aware that in just a few hours, waiting for them beyond the ridge, was the event that would change their young lives and the rest of Israel forever. On that Yom Kippur at 2 p.m., while the nation was fasting and praying, the armies of Egypt and Syria launched a coordinated attack on Israel. Egypt struck to the south, and Syria attacked to the north, taking Israel by surprise. Now the country had to fight for survival. 3 Syrian army brigades, with hundreds of tanks and tens of thousands of infantry troops, reached the northern border and charged towards the Golan Heights. The Syrian army amassed 150,000 infantry soldiers, 900 tanks, 930 artillery cannons, and 35 anti-aircraft missile batteries. The immense Syrian force advanced, to annihilate the state of Israel. Because Israeli intelligence failed to recognize the plans for the sudden attack, only a small number of IDF soldiers were left in the southern Golan, less than 100 airborne warriors, and fewer than 47 tanks. This resulted in an astonishing ratio of 1 IDF soldier for every 100 Syrians. At the moment the Syrian army breached the border, IDF reserve soldiers were still in synagogues with their families. Mobilizing them would take over 24 hours. A few young soldiers would have to fight the battle of their lives until the reserves could be organized. IDF soldiers and tanks defending Outpost 116 absorbed the initial blow. They fought courageously. When they ran out of ammunition, they were ordered to reach the Tel Saki outpost to reload, refuel, and evacuate the wounded. Several damaged IDF tanks also reached Tel Saki. As Yom Kippur was coming to an end, the Syrian army completed its initial attack and began moving towards the southern Golan, toward the Sea of Galilee and the Israeli heartland. They charged south, approaching the foothills of Tel Saki. A handful of IDF paratroopers on Tel Saki, joined by a small number of tanks, fought to halt the Syrian advance. Improvising, they positioned themselves in a way meant to trick the Syrians into thinking they were a larger force. Their constant firing succeeded in delaying the Syrian spearhead. But at daybreak, they found themselves surrounded by thousands of Syrian infantry, tanks, and the rest of the advancing Syrian army. The IDF warriors realized that they were the only force between the Syrians and the state of Israel. Despite suffering numerous casualties, they fought on until they ran out of ammunition. A mile to the south, at the El Al command bunker, it became apparent that Tel Saki was in peril. 2 small paratrooper forces volunteered to evacuate and reinforce their besieged friends on Tel Saki. When rescue forces reached the foot of Tel Saki, they charged the immense Syrian force with great valor. Most were killed in action. A second small rescue force volunteered to try a side approach road and also reached the hill. Like the first force, they charged the numerous Syrian tanks. Like their comrades, most of them perished on the hill. With scarcely any ammunition left, the stranded soldiers on Tel Saki were desperate for another rescue attempt. Hopeful, they entered a small, dilapidated bunker, while the Syrians kept attacking with grenades and bombs.
בסופו של דבר הסורים התעכבו כאן משהו כמו 24 שעות, במקום פשוט לזרום. לא היה פה שום נשק שיכול היה לעצור אותם. אבל הסורים בטעות חשבו שבתל סאקי יש כוח יותר ממה שהיה בעצם. וזאת בעצם אולי, זה עיקר הסיפור, שבסופו של דבר בלמו חטיבה ממוכנת סורית, חטיבה 132, כמעט 24 שעות, שזה דבר מדהים. לולא הם היו כאן, הסורים פשוט היו זורמים על הכביש, ומגיעים עד אל-חמה, עד אולי יורדים לכיוון עין-גב.
As IDF reserve forces got organized and launched a counterattack, a third small rescue force reached Tel Saki and seized the hill, more than 48 hours after it had been surrounded by Syrian forces. The third rescue force liberated their besieged friends, evacuated the wounded, and carried out the sacred task of identifying the lifeless bodies of their fallen brothers in arms scattered across the hillside to bring them home.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to my drive. Okay. Can you hear me? Miriam?
Yes, we hear you, Dan.
Okay, excellent. So that's the Tel Saki command bunker of the Southern Golan that we arrived on October 1st. And mind you, because of the high holiday, the exchange between us and the previous unit was not done in an orderly fashion. It was haphazard, but nonetheless, we made it work. So this is the first picture of us in the El Al bunker, the one with the arrow on the left, that's me. And we're just talking among ourselves. And at that time, we really believed that we were the Maccabees of our generation. At that time, everything was really relatively quiet. And a week earlier, there was some skirmish, but we basically went to go on with our what we called routine maintenance, which really had to do with anti-terrorist activities, reconnaissance mission into Syria. I'll talk about it in a minute, part of this war story. And everything, it was the end of the summer. Everything was dry and was still very hot. On October 4th, you see here 4 guys. You see on the left, Jacob Ramon, that died at Tel Saki. You see Ariel Weissman, our sergeant. This is me to his right, and Ronnie Herzenstein to the right. And we were going into Syria for a reconnaissance mission. And I would like to read to you now a letter. Jacob Ramon, a Jewish boy from Seattle, American, that made Aliyah and was a true Zionist, volunteered to the army, volunteered to the infantry, volunteered to the paratroopers, and volunteered to be with us as our medic. We all went through medic school, but he was our medic. At daybreak on Friday morning, Jacob, after grueling all night, because he had to walk quite a long distance to do some reconnaissance and actually change some batteries in a listening device that we installed in one of the commands of the Syrian army. So actually we had to go there and change those batteries. When we came back, Jacob, which loved nature, insisted to go up on a Tel Saki hill to take pictures. He loved it. We were not happy about it because we were tired, but nonetheless, we went up to the Tel Saki hill. It was not manned at the time yet at this point, and he wrote a letter to his girlfriend at the time. I'm going to read it to you. It's a short letter. Friday, October 5th, 1973. Dear Simona, we were just tasked with what could be the most interesting and daring mission in the entire Golan. We left our base in El Al and followed the banks of the Rukad Wadi. Afterwards, we climbed down through the breach in the fence into the demilitarized area, crossing the border through the Wadi huge ravine onto a passage known as the Turn of Surprises, because the terrorists often set up an ambush for us there. Our team disembarked from the armored carrier and examined the area where someone from the top provided us with cover. After we completing our mission, on our way back, I climbed on a nearby hill, Tel Saki, that overlooked the area. The area is so magnificent, Simona, my darling, really, really fantastic. I think it will be worth a while to pray tomorrow on Yom Kippur for peace, even only because for you and I to hike here together. See you soon. Love, Jacob. And there's a continuance to this story. in a minute or so, in a few minutes. So the morning of Saturday morning, we were already advised that war probably will break. And all the civilians in the Golan Heights were instructed to leave the Golan Heights. At around 10 a.m. on Saturday, Menachem, our team lead officer, asked Ronnie Herzenstein, Shaike, Avital, and Rezi, 4 of our team members, to go with him to Tel Saki for a reconnaissance. I remember that I very much asked to join them. Mind you, that we were 20 years old, very eager to always test our training as Special Forces paratroopers. But Menachem was instructed to take only a small force. We always operated in relatively small forces, and his instruction was to take only a unit of 5 guys together with him. At around noon, all the civilians were charged with leaving the Golan Heights. By that time, we knew specifically that the war was going to break. We didn't know the magnitude. At around 2 p.m., what will sound to a non-military person the most severe thunderstorm sounds. We were trained, we knew what it meant. It was launching thousands and thousands and thousands of artillery shells, and within seconds, the entire Golan Heights, including our section, were covered and started burning. It was the end of the summer, everything was dry. We went into the command bunker that you saw earlier, and for us as paratroopers, we never trained to fight from sitting in a bunker. We were trained to be outside and seek to take always control of the situation. Not in this case. So for the next hour and a half or 2 hours, constant bombardment. And the bunker was built from basalt rocks, but every time we got a direct heat and smoke and the sounds of the explosions and dust, we didn't talk about it, but we were wondering to ourselves whether or not this bunker will hold up to the bombing. At around 4 p.m. when it subsided, I tried to go outside to get my cigarettes. Looking outside the bunker, it looked like the face of the moon. Huge holes in the ground, and everything was burning. And what started to be a fairly beautiful day of Yom Kippur, Saturday Yom Kippur, the skies were black that you couldn't see, more than 50 feet, and everything was burning and smelling from phosphor because the Syrians used phosphor bombs. At the same time, Israeli airplane tried to give us some support, realizing that there was very few of us, so trying to delay the Syrians. But the Syrians used a Soviet methodology by using anti-aircraft on a very edge of the front line. So every Israeli airplane that came to our assistance, probably 1 or 2 dozen anti-aircraft missiles, and they fell down like flies, our airplanes, which presented us with a whole different mission now to go out and find those pilots that were successful in exiting the airplane, the burning airplanes. And if you watch the Valley of Tears, you get a glimpse of us rescue one of those pilots that later on survived, went back, and actually became one of the friends of Tel Saki. By 6 p.m., a settlement 1 mile or less than 1 mile, half mile from Tel Saki, south of Tel Saki, calls our command office, and now they realize there's the war, and those civilians telling us that they did not evacuate and they need help to evacuate and to be evacuated. So our commanding officer, Yaya, we just walked into our main bunker because he was at the command school, high command school. And again, for reference, to the one of you who have children, grandchildren, we were 19, 20 years old. Menachem was 21, our team leader. And the Yaya that was in charge of the entire Golan Heights southern region was 26. And immediately when he walked into the bunker, one could feel his presence. And he started, so immediately he dispatched 2 armored vehicles to Ramat Makshimim, which is between us and Tel Saki, to allow a bus to take the civilians down. And so immediately these 2 vehicles left and went towards Ramat Makshimim. At that time, it was nightfall. Benny Hanani and Pitts, the one that came with me a day earlier to Syria in this reconnaissance mission, was commanding one of these 2 vehicles. They're letting us know around 4 a.m. that the advancing Syrian, they encountered them, they engaged them, they destroyed most of them, but few vehicles went back towards Tel Saki. As daybreak happens, at that time, it was around 5:30 a.m., the Syrians realized that at Tel Saki, that there's nobody there at Tel Saki. There were basically 5 paratroopers exchanging, as Miriam explained, positions, firing from many different ways, going into the Syrians, parked to the north of them, and putting bombs under the trucks, creating chaos on the Syrian side, causing them to delay until the daybreak. Daybreak comes up, the Syrians realize there's no one on the hill. They start shooting up on a hill, trying to advance. And Menachem is telling us that he's seeing, he's watching a tank division. We're paratroopers, never seen a tank division. So Yaya is asking Menachem, he's telling him, count. So Menachem counted, he said, at least 100 tanks. And at the time, Menachem had only 2.5 tanks. One of them was not operational, protecting the Tel Saki hill. And I'm looking at the times, and I'm trying to just not delay myself too much. The next morning, on October 7th, there's an instruction for all the people that we were left in the El Al bunker to retreat, because it's obvious to us, based on what Menachem is reporting, that there are thousands and thousands of Syrian army. We're less than 20 at the time in a bunker, 1.5 miles south. By the time we're giving instruction to retreat, to go towards another small town, it's called Bnei Yehuda, where our Dr. Gandol, also from Seattle, that made Aliyah, was there with about 10 or 12 medics waiting for instruction. By the time we make it to him, was already too late. So what you see here in this picture, us outside the bunker in El Al, taking cover from the Syrian airplanes that basically were bombing us. We couldn't actually move much. About the same time, or maybe an hour earlier, Benny Hanani is begging, asking, requesting Yaya to permit him to go to help Menachem, that was already giving us signs of desperation. He was desperate because he was running out of ammunition completely. Menachem asked for friendly fire from one of the artillery that was sitting down by the Sea of Galilee. And this guy from the IDF artillery sends one round, which takes a lifetime for someone that's being attacked by a few hundred Syrian commandos. Finally, the round falls near the Tel Saki dilapidated bunker, and Menachem tells him, okay, from now on, every 10 seconds, give me another round. And the guy on the other end of the mic saying, I'm sorry, but I'm out of ammunition. So Beni Hanan and Pitts end up driving this half a mile towards Tel Saki. They're not realizing that across the crest of this hill, the entire Syrian army is still parking. They're watching these two vehicles charging the entire Syrian army, thinking this is a trick. Within, when they reach the bottom of the hill of Tel Saki, within 5 to 10 minutes, we hear an open mic, a machine gun, and within 10 minutes, all but one perish. When we hear that, the last call for help of this first rescue attempt, and I'll share with you a picture of those two vehicles. Our second commanding officer, Itzik Nan, turns into the bunker. Well, probably 20 of us or 19 of us left standing in a bunker, and ask for 6 volunteers to go and rescue the rescue force, because we believe that everyone in Menachem and the other guys are dead. So when he turned into the bunker, every single one of us, and that's super important for our story and messaging, because we knew already what was going on, every single one of us stands up and wants to go. And instead of 6, they embark 11 of our guys on the last armored vehicles. They go towards Tel Saki, and within half an hour, we hear them being engaged, and similar end to the first rescue force. All but 3 perish on the other foothill of Tel Saki. If you ever want to see the entire story, we created a documentary. It's called The Battle Over the Soul. You can see actually us, the surviving, talking about the details. So Yaya, at this juncture, our commanding officer Yaya, is contemplating a plan to what to do next. As we're talking to him on the radio, one of the people from the second rescue attempt, a guy by the name of Meir Bruckenthal, is reaching us, telling us that two of the guys are gravely wounded, hiding in the field, and we go and contemplate a plan to find these 2 people that were gravely wounded but hiding in a field, basically bleeding to death. Mind you that now between us and Tel Saki, the Syrian army is advancing. They're stopping about 300 yards from El Al, from our bunker in El Al. At that time, we had no vehicles. There are really only 6 of us standing, and only with our personal weapons and grenades. That's it. We talk among ourselves, and we make a pact that no matter what, we're not going to leave. We understand the consequences, but we tell Yaya that whatever he decides to do to go towards Tel Saki, we're with him. To our amazement, the Syrian army, which could at this juncture easily to put it into gear and go down into the Sea of Galilee and into Tveria, they don't advance. And the night falls, Sunday night falls, we believe that everyone in Tel Saki is dead. Around 11 p.m., the radio in code, and it says, commanding 10, this is match 11. Each one of us had its own code. And of course, I recognize the voice, Shlomo Abital, which I've known from my childhood and throughout the training. It's like listening to someone from the other side. And we all thought everyone is dead. And he's telling us that everyone is wounded and they're succeeding or surviving because they covered themselves with the body of the fallen friends. And the Syrians keep throwing grenades into the little bunker. So Yahya is contemplating a plan for us to be the third force to reach Tel Saki and rescue both the people that we thought were wounded and whoever survived at Tel Saki. And I was, one of my training in the paratroopers was explosives. And one of the things that the Syrian army used to do to booby trap, to put bombs underneath the bodies of the enemy soldier, in this case, the bodies of our friends. So Yahya specifically said, listen, Dan, I know those are your best friends. It's not going to be easy, but I'm asking you, number one, once we conquer Tel Saki back from the Syrians, you need to go to each one of the dead people, make sure that they're not booby traps, so that we don't create more casualties, right? Because if you move the bodies will explode. And I ask you, since you know who they are, to write with a pencil a note on a piece of paper and put it in their shoes, if they have shoes. So this is us living, this is during the war, we're leaving El Al towards Tel Saki. At the far end of this picture is Tel Saki. Mind you that some of the tanks that were starting to arrive that morning, on Monday morning, were dilapidated from the Second World War, unequipped, and they start blowing up within minutes. Then we had the second wave of tanks, the one that you showed here in the picture, to the left, and with two tanks in front of us, loading the Dr. Grandor, and the 12 medics, us on 5 vehicles, we driving towards Tel Saki. The Syrian army is right in front of us. I'm going to show you, those are Syrian tanks. And we encounter those Syrian tanks, engage them and destroy them. This is an aerial photo of actually the minutes that we arrived. Because we were a special unit, we had reconnaissance airplanes flying over us to ascertain that they were in communication with us, non-combat. So what you see here on the left with the yellow arrow, you see the actually bunker, what we call the bunker, some dilapidated concrete, where the people were at that time hiding. And on the right, you see another version of this photo as we're driving towards Tel Saki. We stopped about a mile away from Tel Saki, and Yahya had the fortitude to tell us, I said, listen, we cannot fight the entire Syrian army. So if we drive very fast through the Syrian, I'll show you a picture, an actual picture in a minute. If we drive very fast through the Syrian army, they'll start shoot, but they'll shoot at one another on both sides of the road. And we believed him somehow. And everyone got into these vehicles, on the machine guns. We are breaking through the Syrian line and firing our machine guns to the left and to the right through the Syrian army front line. This is actually us driving through, as approaching Tel Saki. The war is very chaotic. We are by the foothills of Tel Saki, and it's very hard to differentiate and distinguish between friend or foe because of the dust and the bombing and everything that's going on. But I go down on my knees here and I pray that all this effort and all these friends that actually perished in an effort to save the 5 guys in Tel Saki, I said, God, please let them live. So not all this effort will be in vain. We look with binoculars at Tel Saki, where you see on the left, oops, I don't know what happened. Sorry about that. So I look at the left side of this picture where the Tel Saki with binoculars, we see Syrian soldiers on top of the hill and on the left side of the foothill. We see maybe 50 to 100 Syrian soldiers on the foothills. So for us, it's clear that Tel Saki is being controlled by Syrians. You saw this, we're driving the last half a mile through the Syrian forces, firing our weapons to both sides of the road and thousands of Syrian soldiers on the right and on the left of us at this juncture because they were in control. Unfortunately, also the Israeli army didn't know that we're there. So we're being bombarded also by the Israeli artillery that think that we are Syrian retreating. Those are the two destroyed armored vehicles of Beni Hanani and Ariel Pitts with the 14 guys, 13 of them died. So this is the picture of those two vehicles at the foothills of Tel Saki. This is the foothills of Tel Saki. So when we approached the hill, we had one tank left with us. There were 6 of us. And one thing that really comes to mind, the Syrian officer, we take position, the Syrian officer had a whistle, almost like sound to us like a dog whistle, like with the monotonic, very loud, annoying whistle. So he will blow the whistle, the Syrian soldiers will stand up, charge us, will shot them, he'll blow the whistle again, another 5-10 Syrian soldiers came and charge us. That goes on for about 10-15 minutes. We're going through, thank God that at that time we had enough ammunition in our personal weapons. And this goes on for like I said, 10-15 minutes. This is a picture of a MiG airplane coming and just bombing both Tel Saki and us at the same time in the support of the Syrian army that is parked on the foothill of Tel Saki. That's a MiG-17. This is the Tel Saki hill after we conquered it. And all this hill is full of the bodies of our friends, all the foothills. At the very top of this hill where the bunker is, where Menachem is, they're Syrians. They're actually Syrians inside the bunker with Menachem, not realizing that actually there's Israeli IDF soldiers right next to them, maybe 1 foot behind them. But they're all quiet with grenades open. And if the Syrians realize that there are people in the bunker, they were about to explode and just kill themselves and the Syrians coming into the bunker. And the Syrians, they don't turn around. And we make it all the way to the top of the foothills and conquer maybe another 30 or Syrian soldiers on the top of the hill. And I'm not sure how that happened because there's only 6 of us left at the time. and we conquer the hill. And Dr. Gondol, as a side note, insists of taking 2 of the people prisoners, and he saves their lives. This is what we call bunker. This is Menachem's vehicle, the one that he reached Tel Saki on Shabbat, on Saturday at 10 o'clock. And from this dilapidated bunker, 27 soldiers coming out. It's just incredible. If you go there, and I hope you come and visit, it's physically incomprehensible how this amount of people can hide there, and there were bodies of our dead friends. And the Syrians, through this opening, threw 5 or 6 grenades and a missile, but they covered themselves with the bodies of our friends. Everyone, of course, was gravely wounded at that time. This is us doing a triage. What you see here, most of these people are the doctors and some of the tank units that start coming behind us, medics and doctors trying to save as many possible of these 27 guys that were gravely wounded. A light at the end of some of this, if there can be any light in a story, the guy on the left, his name is Moti Aviam, he's a tank unit. The guy on the right, his name is Chaim Kunda. He basically is giving him his last rites, equivalent, you know, he's holding his hand. It's one of these 27 guys that came out from the bunker, very gravely wounded. So we, mind you, it's the middle of the war around us, everything explodes, everything burns. And we know that if we don't bring a helicopter down, even in the middle of all these explosions, 3 of our friends will just not make it because they're too gravely wounded. When I see, we landed the helicopter and we created a special flare and special communicating with the helicopter. And he lands right at the foothills of Tel Saki. When I see this guy, Moti Aviam, I go back to Dr. Gondol and said, listen, his name is Michael. I said, Michael, if we don't put, and I didn't know at the time, Moti, because he was in an armored division. I said, if you don't put him up, he's not going to make it. He had many hits. He had bullet holes into his lungs, but there was only 3 spots in this helicopter. And making decisions. So I went to the helicopter pilot and I said, listen, if I dismantle your machine gun, and mind you that the machine gun at this juncture and the war is breaking up would be useless anyway. And I said, if I dismantle your machine gun and find a rope and tie this guy to the stand that holds the machine gun, can you give me permission? He said, we have rope, go ahead. So I took Moti to the helicopter. Here you see on the right-hand side, took Moti to the helicopter, tied him with a rope to this stand of the machine gun, and he made it to Rambam in Haifa. Today he's one of the top archaeologists in Israel, probably in the top 5 archaeologists in Israel. Amazing family, and of course we're best of friends. So the grueling task, I'm going to just touch upon it for 1 minute, to go one by one, touch my friends that were dead, some of them already 20 hours, make sure that they were not booby-trapped with bombs. This is not people that you just meet in the street. This is people that I knew either from my childhood or I did at least 2.5 years of grueling training, going one by one, making sure they're not booby-trapped and writing a note of their name and the details to the extent they knew. And we put the bodies of our friends. We wanted to make certain that we are the one that bring our dead friends to burial, so the families will have to be able to sit Shiva and cry on their loved ones. And two and a half days later, we're getting break for 2 days. We actually didn't sleep or eat for 3 days at that time. So they take, Yaya had the intuition not to let us continue our lives with the experience of Tel Saki, and he's asking the chief of staff to allow us to go and rebuild our fortitude in the war, and we're being picked up with airplanes and helicopters and dropped all the way down to Sinai and cross the Suez Canal with the first force. I don't remember much about it, but I know that on October 13, I was gravely wounded. I had very long recovery. I was very gravely wounded in Egypt. I went over a mine and I very severe wounded. I had to actually learn how to walk again. And this is a picture of me being evacuated to Hadassah in Jerusalem, back to Israel. So here's the epilogue of this story. And today, Tel Saki, this is Tel Saki today, we build a visitor center, tens of thousands of visitors every year. Birthright, the March of the Living, even during the Corona, and even more so subsequently to Valley of Tears, thousands and thousands of people, to a point that actually we started being worried that it will create problems for us, but thousands and thousands of kids from all parts of Israel. And when non-Corona, the coming, I think the year before the Corona, we had about 70,000 youngsters coming, listening to the story, how the impossible became possible. We stood together, determined to never let it happen again. Talking about the Holocaust, determined not to leave our friends, and determined to protect the one country that we have. And to our surprise, the Syrian army thought that were a lot more of us than we were in reality, and they just didn't advance into Israel. And that's the essence, the part of the story, that even things sometimes in life, when things seem impossible, if you stand and stick to your guns, and together you're surrounded by people that you trust and love, the impossible can become possible. And so this is Tel Saki. And the last picture that I'll share, it's 2 years ago, just the year before Corona. This is a picture of my family and grandkids raising this flag. You can get the idea of all this flag sizes. We have it. This flag has very deep meaning for us, because despite our loss and despite all the hardship, we're here, we build families, we have kids and grandkids, and we continue life. And for us, it's a sign of also unity. There are no signs on Tel Saki for the paratroopers or for armored brigade or ranks, only the flag of the state of Israel and the pictures of our fallen friends. That's it. So everyone can relate and come and listen to this impossible story. And that's why it became a symbol for Israel society of perseverance. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Dan, thank you so much for this incredible story, for sharing it with us, for sharing all these pictures that I know you said you haven't shared much before. So we're very, very honored that you're with us tonight. And there are already some questions coming in, which we'll take in just a few minutes. But first, we'd like to honor Dan's 32 friends from Tel Saki. So we are going to call on our 32 friends who have taken on the honor of lighting a candle tonight and saying the name of one of the fallen heroes from Tel Saki. So if you're one of our honorees to light the candle, please get ready. And Cantor, do you have the pictures? Wonderful. All right, so we'll call on Rabbi to light the first candle.
Aaron Avrutsky.
Thank you. William Mayer, you can light the next candle.
Dan Almagor.
Becca Wanatik.
Yehuda Aryeh.
Debbie Brody.
She must not.
Debbie Brody. Can you unmute yourself? There we go. Debbie, we did not hear you. Can you unmute yourself again?
Doron Atziel.
Thank you, Debbie. Phyllis and Larry Levin.
Yosef Ben Hayam.
Thank you. Lynn Goldman. Lynn, can you unmute yourself so we can hear the name?
Dan Beatis.
Thank you. Oren Langer.
Chaim Baron.
Thank you. Jerry Gross.
I am Ben Kadar.
Thank you, Jerry. Joel Charm.
Zvika Barkowski.
Thank you. Eileen Manahan.
Annie Barak.
Thank you. Alicia Zurlo.
Ariel Peets Weissman.
Thank you. Ronnie Almagor.
Ronnie Herzenstein, who I'm named after.
Thank you, Ronnie. Greg Milich.
Yoav Yakir.
Thank you. Ron Glass.
Roni Hanami.
Thank you. Mark Trattenberg.
David Cohn.
Thank you. Linda Forgosh.
Abraham Cohen.
Thank you, Linda. Hannah Kornblum.
Shmuel Kaspin.
Ira Kaplan.
Yitzhak Cohen.
Thank you. Ivy and Jay Rubin.
Alex Lipschitz.
Say it again.
Alex Lipschitz.
Thank you. Ellen and Monroe Chernomas.
Yaakov Levy.
Thank you. Rick Connell.
Joseph Montaka.
Thank you. Jeff Grazel.
Aharon Molkandov.
Thank you. Alex Marcus.
Avner Fulltime.
Thank you. Sue Wallerstein.
Moshe Selner.
Jerry Lon.
Yonatan Foy.
Michael Balaban.
Shalom Fahima.
Thank you. Leah Gabriel. Leah, if you can unmute yourself, please.
Yaakov Rosenthal.
Thank you. Peppy Glass.
Chaim Kunda.
Thank you. Carol Gordner.
Michael Schwartz.
Thank you. Hadass Almagor, who's Dan's daughter.
Yaakov Jacob Ramon.
Thank you. Rita Gottfried.
Avner Schatz.
And Cantor Galita Dune Cohen.
Dani Spielberg.
Thank you.
El male rachamim, shochen bamromim, המצא מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים דהורים וגיבורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, לנשמות הקדושים שנלחמו בכל מערכות ישראל, במחתרת ובצבא ההגנה לישראל, ושנפלו במלחמתם, ומסרו נפשם על קדושת השם, העם והארץ, בעבור שאנו מתפללים, לעילוי נשמותיהם. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, בגן עדן מנוחתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבותם, ויעמדו לגורלם לקץ הימים, ונאמר אמן.
God, who is full of compassion and who dwells on high, grant perfect peace under the wings of your Shekhinah, among the holy, pure, and heroes in the light of your firmament. To the holy souls of all those who fought with strength in every action for Israel, in Israel's defense forces, who died in Israel's wars, and gave their lives for the sake of God, the people, and the country. We pray to raise up their souls. Compassionate God, protect them for eternity under your wings, and bind their souls in the bonds of life. You are their portion. In the Garden of Eden, let them find peace. May they rest in peace and stand firmly to the end of days. And we say, Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who took on the lighting of a candle and for remembering these special and incredible heroes who gave their lives so that all of us can have our country. And as the rabbi said, you know, they gave it to us on a silver platter. So we'd love to invite some questions. You are welcome to put them in the chat box. I already have a few, so keep them coming if you have questions. You can also, if you want, raise your hand with the little button, and we will, you know, give you an opportunity to ask the question directly. So Dan, if you're ready, we have one question that came in, interested, and I was wondering the same, these pictures that you took or that you showed us, were the video and these photographs taken by a journalist embedded with the paratroopers?
So the answer is yes. So one of the privileged opportunity being in a special paratrooper unit that our movement were even back then monitored. So our sources of pictures are twofold. One from an army photographer that the company was embedded with us, and another set of pictures and some videos from army videographer that also was embedded with us. They were really not supposed to be in the front line most of this time. We learned literally a month ago that actually they were with us, but we did not realize. So yes, it was a combination of an embedded photographer and an embedded videographer that was accompanying us through our missions.
All right, here's another question that we have. Thank you, Dan. I see in the video that you showed in the beginning of the presentation a lot of American military equipment. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but Patton tanks, half-tracks, F-4 Phantoms, C-130s. How important is it that the U.S. continue to be or resume being the staunch supporter and ally of Israel and stand against the traditional enemies in the Middle East?
Yeah, I don't think I'm equipped or qualified to answer a political question. I can say that without American support during the war, Israel would have perished. And we literally, as a country, we literally ran out of ammunition. So when we went from Tel Saki, from the Golan Heights, to Egypt, on our way to Egypt, we still did not have enough armaments, bullets, vehicles. But in these 2.5 days that took us to travel this distance, it waited for us containers of American in nylons, equipment. So, and without it, Israel would have perished, no question.
Thank you, Dan. So I hope that many of you watched the documentary that Dan shared. If you want it and you missed the link, we can send it to you again. It's really incredible. And then, of course, there was also on HBO, The Valley of Tears. So we hope that many of you watched it. But we have a question here for you, Dan, to comment on how accurate The Valley of Tears was in general.
So it's not a documentary. When the creator of this TV series, which was filmed primarily at Tel Saki, when he first called me, I'm always apprehensive from my career, this kind of cooperation and spinning of stories. But I liked a lot this guy, Yaron Zilberman. And the one thing that I asked him to respect in terms of creativity, to respect the memory of our friends. So chapter 6, 7, and 8 are as close depiction to the story as one can. We did not have any women fighting with us in the front line like in a series. The story of this lady, for instance, does exist. She was in charge of collecting all the names of all the fallen soldiers in the Golan front. So by and large, again, it's not a documentary. It's a 4 TV series made for an American audience, with everything that involved around it. But some of the essence of the story of perseverance, we were part of the filming from the very beginning. We permitted the creator to actually set shop at Tel Saki without any predisposed issues or limitations in terms of his creativity. And obviously his vision was a good creation because all these millions of people that watched it. And right now, once COVID passed, we have over 600 requests from American institutions for organized trips to go to Tel Saki for an organized visits. And I'm inviting also all this congregation to please come and see. The place looks beautiful. You'll see a lot of amazing people there. And it's a really good place. You can see what we build there and how we leverage this story to tell the impossible became possible.
Thank you, Dan. I have a question because I know that your mission, became so strongly to remember your friends. from the Hill. So I'm wondering, I know that your son, Ronnie, is here with us tonight, and he actually lit the candle for Ronnie Herzenstein. Am I saying his name right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you can share something with us about Ronnie.
So I said that I'm going to share with you at the end the story of actually Jacob and Ronnie, because when we came back from Syria that morning, Ronnie was a guy that his personality we all have in our lives, that we know someone that everyone loves, and he is friends with everyone around them, and no matter what they do, you can never be mad at them. That's Ronnie. Jacob, on the other hand, was an American boy, very serious, took his job very seriously, and sometimes we're making, because we were 19, 20 years old, we're making fun how serious he was. We were all telling him to calm down. Ronnie and Jacob had an amazing relationship between them, and the same rock that Jacob sat down writing his last letter, I found his body next to Ronnie a day later. So they never separated in life or death, within a few yards of each other.
Wow.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that, Dan. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Any other questions? I'm just checking to see that I didn't miss anyone's hand. I don't see any more questions, so we'll conclude with one last question. Oh, Alex Marcus. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Hi, it's Judah, it's Alex's son. But so yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story. I had a question. Did any which way did your Judaism like kind of affect your mindset while you were fighting, or either while you were on the battlefield or after? How did your Judaism affect your like mindset as a soldier?
That's a very, very great question. So we grew up with the stories of the Holocaust, and we were embedded within us, and especially in our special unit, in the paratrooper unit of Never Again. So the Judaism had a major part in what has transpired at Tel Saki, because we're determined, we know that no matter what happened, we're never going to let the Shoah, the Holocaust, to happen again. And if that means giving our lives, we were ready and to give our lives. So this aspect of Judaism was deeply impacting all our decisions, and stay there and fight what seemingly looked upon on a surface as impossible.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure I didn't miss anyone else. Last chance for questions. All right, so maybe this final one. If there's one message to the world or to us as a community to take from the Tel Saki story, what is it that you would want us to take away from the story?
The one message is a message of devotion, love, that light always wins. And when things look seemingly impossible in life, and the world is not always kind to us, if you stick to your guns and if you feel strongly about yourself, do it all the way, because you can win, even if it seemingly looks impossible.
So true. Thank you, Dan, for setting the example for that to all of us. Thank you so much for sharing your story tonight, and to your family for joining us, and for all of you for joining us. And I think
just before we close, I also want to thank Don for sharing his story I have one question, if I'd like to just throw a last question in there as well. For you specifically, in retelling the story, that you've taken this commitment to retell the story and the story of your friends. I imagine that for you, this is not an easy thing each time. And I'm wondering if you could just take a moment of reflection on both the kavod, the honor it is for you to share their stories, but also the sorrow that you might feel.
Yes, so it's very, very difficult to talk about what has transpired for us. In our heart is a big tragedy, losing all our friends that did not come back. I made a promise to my friends at the end of the battle, standing in front of them, to one day to be able to tell this incredible story as the Syrian army started moving backwards and the bodies of my friends were laying at my feet. I made a promise to them, and I am fulfilling this promise. I promise to tell the story, and to tell the story with love and passion, and not talk about death and politics, but focus on the values that we fought for and my friends fought for. So yes, and since also I was the last one to touch the bodies of my friends, the bereaved family, also each and every one of them asked me to show them where the loved one fell. It's a grueling task. It's a grueling task, but it's a story that it must be told. And the necessity is overcomes our personal agony. And because with this example and the messaging that love always wins, and there's a price to it, we as people, we can be together and be strong together. And for that price, we are sacrificing our own emotions and standing here in front of you and sharing this very painful story for us.
Thank you.
Thank you for that reflection.
Yes. So, we called our son Ronnie, after Ronnie Herzenstein, my best friend, Ronnie Herzenstein. We coming from a secular background home, but I wanted to remember Benny Hanani. And once we had the financial means, we have a strict kosher home that we live for the remembrance of Benny Hanani. And the last thing, not the last, but the third part of this promise is to do everything possible to remember the sacrifice that this 19, 20-year-old guys literally gave everything for us, for the state, and for the Jewish nation.
Thank you, Dan. I encourage all of you to listen to the podcast. I just got a question if other survivors, from Tel Saki are telling their story. Listen to the podcast. It's really incredible. Watch the documentary. If you can, watch The Valley of Tears, but personally, I feel the podcast and the documentary really are special. So thank you again for sharing your story, Dan. We also have pins for everyone. So we will email you and we'll have pins for you all. Thank you for joining. And I think, Cantor, you're going to end us off with Hatikva.
Kol od balevav pnima, nefesh Yehudi homiya, ולפאתי מזרח קדימה, עין לציון צופיה. עוד לא אבדה תקוותנו, התקווה בת שנות 2000, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים. להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים.
Thank you, Cantor Shana.
And once again, thank you to Dan Almagor for sharing this very important moment in the history of Israel. And yes, next time we all go to Israel together, in Yirtzeh Hashem, we will, some of us have been to Tel Saki before, but we will go and have our group picture taken in front of that flag as well.
Yes,
And now we have the memories of all of the people in our hearts that occupy part of Dan's heart every single day. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.